Hello. For 60 years without break, Manx Radio has spoken to and with the Manx nation, and indeed with those who, for whatever reason, came here. This is the first of two programmes hearing the thoughts of those people, some of whom were household names, politicians, royalty, entertainers, those who, for whatever reason, were well known. But let's start with pop royalty. Cliff Richard, whose extraordinarily long pop career moved alongside his deeply held Christian beliefs.
He's with us now in the studio, and it's good to have you here, Cliff, in Manx Radio Studio.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again. I have to admit that apparently I've been here twice before, and I hate to say it, but I can't remember them. They were probably slotted in on a major tour or something, and quite often the cities all kind of merge in to one great blob. But I've now spent almost 24 hours here, and seen it both on a cloudy day and a sunny day, and I don't think I'll forget it this time.
We're very pleased about that, and perhaps you'll come back again. But why did you come this time?
Well, I was invited to come here and speak and sing about my faith, and when I can, I accept those kind of invitations. It's a great privilege to have a platform like mine where you can actually go and speak about Jesus and about God, and to me that's a real privilege, the fact that people will actually, take time out on a blustery night to come out and hear someone like myself speak about things like that. So I accept those invitations when I can. Obviously it's governed by what I'm doing professionally, and at this moment in time I have a relatively easy time of it. I'm just in and out of the studio, and so therefore it was easy to say, yeah, let's go.
I suppose that raises the question that why is it that someone who comes from the music world, as you've done, and had not a lifetime yet, but a good period of time of success in that world, why is it people want to hear about your faith and perhaps they don't want to hear about faith of many other people?
Well, it's a curious thing, isn't it? I mean, mankind is so perverse. There are people who speak much better than I do, people who have had a wealth of experience, 1,000% more than I've ever had. But that's life, I am a rock and roll singer. I captured the imaginations of a lot of people very early on, way back in the late 50s, early 60s, and I've got a career, and so therefore I might appear on Top of the Pops on a Thursday, and then on a Sunday I might be in someone's local church, and it's just a lot to do with curiosity, but a lot to do with the fact that being a pop singer makes you popular, and that means that people are prepared to come and hear almost anything that you have to say. And there are ministers and church ministers, who spend their lifetime devoted to it. And often the ministers said to me when I visited a church saying, I said exactly the same as that last week, but they didn't listen to me. and I can understand the frustration that some people must feel, but that's what life is like. It's a bit like being at home. You can say things at home, and then a friend comes in and says the same thing, and it's totally acceptable. It's exactly the same. So I just grasp the opportunity, though, whenever I can, and say, well, that's my responsibility as a man as a Christian to present Jesus when I can, and so I do.
A household name for her connection with John Lennon, Cynthia Lennon ran a restaurant in Castletown called Bunter's. In 1988, she said, "For the last 6 months, we've had the restaurant. It was fate that we got it. When we first came to the island, we stayed at a bed and breakfast place with a lady called Mrs. Jennings. Within walking distance was this restaurant called Bunter's. We fell in love with the atmosphere, but didn't have any idea about running a restaurant, none whatsoever. We got very friendly with the owner, who was 60 at the time. He decided he'd had enough of it and said we were the people he'd love to buy it off him. So we started thinking about it. We'd only come here for a sabbatical, to take a year off, and that's what we were doing before we got started, to get bored stiff, and this came along. Now we were there every single evening." Whoever spoke with Cynthia always wanted to know more about her legendary husband.
Yes, I was 18 and John was 17, and we ended up in the same class together, whether he liked it or not, or I liked it or not. And we ended up, and that's where it all began. The rest of life sort of took off from Liverpool Art College.
Yes, did you see him first of all as a nice boy who was an artist in your class, or was it because he was the future big rock star?
Though I didn't see any future big rock star or future great artist, I saw a scruffy student who appealed to me because of his sense of humour and because of his charisma and enigma. He had all those things going for him, but not a great deal of academic qualities, or qualities as far as being disciplined in any way in life by the tutors. So he was a very rough diamond when I met him. And I suppose, you know, they say in life that opposites do tend to attract. And in many ways we were so opposite you couldn't imagine any two people more opposite. But underneath that, you know, the facade of looking different, there was a great deal that we had in common.
Did you? Obviously, he was a person who, I suppose, at the end, will become known as a giant rebel. Did you feel that in many ways that this rebellion was something that was in you as well?
Well, I think everybody has a certain amount of rebellion in them. I think most people want to see what they can and feel what they can of life. They don't want to be stuck in the same corner. So I think you must rebel, you know, by your own instincts. And you must expand and you must broaden. You make mistakes. All rebels make mistakes one way or another. You can't help that. But it's only the process of learning by being rebellious, by making mistakes, perhaps by hurting people, which you don't mean to hurt people. But at the end of the day, if you don't forge ahead with your dreams and ideals and beliefs, then I don't understand what life is about.
You obviously became involved in the Beatles' music, or the music around John Lennon, at this time. Was music important to you?
Music it's been part of my life, really, because my father was musical. My brother wanted to be a concert pianist, but my father couldn't afford, you know, to put him through the college and everything. So we were always surrounded by music and pianists at home. And I was very fond. I'm not musical as far as any musical instruments are concerned, but I was always surrounded by lovely music and classical music, and I suppose I was brought up on West Side Story, Frank Sinatra, all those sort of classical musicians and singers of that era. But I wasn't into pop at the time.
And yet pop became very much a part of your life. Did you ever grow to love it or like it?
Well, I have very Catholic tastes in music. I like all music that appeals to me at certain times, any more than the poetry or books that I read. I believe that you take what you need from each creative work, whether it's a song or whether it's a book or whether it's a painting. And I think that's how I've appreciated music. I wouldn't say that I was ever a fan of anybody, because I always feel that's going slightly over the top and it cuts you off from the rest of the world and the rest of music. But I believe that the music that I've loved has always been fairly classical, and I believe the Beatles' music is pretty classical.
Flying royalty visited the island in the form of Sheila Scott.
This is myth too. She's a very special aircraft to me. In fact, I don't think of her as an aircraft at all. She's a person. I'm very proud of her indeed, because most record breakers and racers have several aircraft. It's the same aircraft that's done it all, and in fact she does do it all for me.
Say I wanted to buy it. I'm not likely to, but if I was, would you sell it? How much? Is it priceless?
You couldn't buy it. Yes, she is priceless. Because she's done so much, and because she's covered in goodwill messages from people around the entire world, she's quite irreplaceable. And I was terribly lucky. This is an ordinary airplane straight off the line, and somehow she developed this wonderful character. I wouldn't dream of selling it. While I'm talking to you, can I say what a fabulous weekend we've had here on the Isle of Man. And what I find is so wonderful, I really do think that the Isle of Man probably is the most sporting island in the world, because what with the TT races and the early tourist trophy car races, the old Tynewold air race, and now the Manx Derby, you know, it's fabulous that one of the very few air races we have in Great Britain should be held here.
I must congratulate you on your speech tonight. You'd obviously done your homework. You knew all about the Manx history in this respect.
What do you mean done my homework? Of course I knew. I've known all about it since I was so high.
It was rare that members of the royal family spoke in public when they came here. Prince Andrew came as a global business ambassador and addressed a business gathering in Douglas. His father, Prince Philip, was an entertaining speaker here at the Villa Marina.
Well, Mr. Mayor, and ladies and gentlemen, I know that everyone in this hall and all the others attending this conference who haven't arrived here yet, or haven't got up, would like me to say how much they appreciate your very warm and generous welcome to this island and to Douglas in particular. And I'd like to thank you for your kind remarks, and I will certainly give your message to the Queen. I might add, Mr. Mayor, that I rather admire the courage, not to say foolhardiness, of the people of Douglas for allowing this lot to invade this quiet and peaceful place. In case, Mr. Mayor, you suspect that we have also come armed, I want to assure you that I and my successor will make every attempt to control them with this, which I think must be one of the largest shillelaghs ever to be exported from one of your neighbours. But if I know anything about it, the people of Douglas will have no cause for complaint. Our intentions are entirely peaceful. If there are any complaints, I expect it will probably come from the delegates about the very short time they're going to be able to spend here. Incidentally, I recommend a drive in one of those horse-drawn trams. It's a little drafty, but otherwise quite pleasant. And I understand it's the only form of public transport that actually makes a profit. But don't spread it around. We don't want people drawing the wrong conclusions. I must say there was one thing about it this morning that surprised me somewhat, is that, after all, it was the horse that was driving or pulling. I was merely driving, and the chap sitting next to me kept on saying, "Come on, Philip." I'm glad to say it turned out that the horse was called Philip also.
A Manx ship with a claim to fame and appearance in the film Chariots of Fire was the Mona's Isle, but a later Mona's Isle was rather unloved, it seems. When this version set off from Douglas for the last time, Charles Gard was there.
Well, she's been variously described as a shed, the biggest clapped-out dinghy this side of Hamburg, and many other things that it would be inappropriate for me to mention on the radio. She is, of course, the Mona's Isle, bought by the Steam Packet Company in October 1984 and coming into operation earlier this year. If ships have memories, then I'm sure the memories for the Isle will not be very pleasant from her time in Manx waters. She certainly hasn't been the company's most popular ship. Bought at a time when the company, after the merger, needed to gain public confidence and prove themselves as better than they were before, the Mona's Isle has proved to be a bit of a liability. Since she was built, a great deal has been added to her, notably the superstructure at her stern, all of which has served to make her somewhat unmanageable. And amongst her disasters has been blown onto a sandbank outside Heysham, taking 12 hours to make the crossing, and the fact that she can get caught by wind, which makes her difficult to manoeuvre in Douglas Harbour. To help solve that problem, the tug Salisbury of the Laxey Towing Company, captained by Stephen Carter, has been employed for some months now to assist the Mona's Isle in and out of Douglas Harbour each day. And I'm on the bridge of the tug now with Captain Carter, and we're just nosing up to the side of the Mona's Isle as she makes her last exit from Douglas.
District Douglas, yes, the Mona's Isle is about to sail any time now, so just stand well clear of the fairway. And as soon as she's clear, give us another call on 12 and we'll have a berth for you. Over. Yes, I'll do that. Listening 16 now, but I will call it on 12 when we're about, so that's it. Oh, Douglas, Monazile, we should be ready to go in a couple of minutes now. Thank you, Monazile. On the big. Thank you.
Over the 6 decades, Manx Radio has been the opportunity for many to give their thoughts on the island, its life, its language, its customs. Manx legend Mona Douglas was well versed in Manx customs.
That was one thing that they always believed, that all the cattle went down on their knees at midnight on Christmas Eve. That was old Christmas Eve, the 5th, you see. And another thing was that the bees that were tied up, were sort of fastened up for the winter, they used to come out of the hive and swarm round the hive in midnight on Christmas Eve.
You've not seen that yourself?
No, I haven't seen that.
But you will know people who have.
Oh, I suppose people that I heard talk about it, I suppose some of them must have seen it, yes. How would they know if they hadn't seen it?
Yeah. What other sort of things do you remember from way back about these Christmas traditions?
Well, another thing is connected, I think, with the old Manx name of the day, in Shan Le Tibertoscha, the old day of the water well, because there were an awful lot, as you probably know, of what were called healing wells in the island. And they, of course, they're mostly supposed to be dedicated to Christian saints now, but I think they go a long way further back than Christianity, and the old idea would be that either the well itself or the spirit of the well would do the healing. But anyway, they still call them healing wells, and on that morning of the 6th, it was the right day to go to the well and bathe your eyes. They always said it was for sore eyes. It could be for any kind of physical trouble, I suppose. But they always said it was for sore eyes, and you were supposed to go to the nearest healing well and bathe your eyes in the water and make some little offering to the well. It was generally a small coin, like a penny or something like that.
Correct use of the Manx language has long been a touchy point. This from former Speaker of the Keys Victor Neal and Thelma Neal.
My father had Manx-speaking parents who also spoke English, but they wouldn't speak the Manx to the children. But I think my father must have had sharp ears, because he picked up a fair amount, you see. And so
you've got a few samples
a few words that we picked up in our time with Dad, you see. Well, my mum used this one, and it was what a slew. And I had a brother, and she'd say, now just let's see if your slew is right, you see.
Your hair?
Your hair. But I used to think it was the parting. But I was talking to Bernard Kane, and he said, no, there's a joiner's tool called a slew, and that was for smoothing, rather like a plane. And so he said that would mean that the hair was smooth. There's a brock, which means you've made a bit of a mess. And Vic smiles when I tell this, because I went up to see an aunt of mine who was married to my father's brother, and she asked me to cut the bread. Well, I'm left-handed, and she just said, oh, will you cut the bread, please, Thelma? Well, he laughed, because I can't cut bread yet. And so she came in and she said, dear me, she said, you've made an awful brock of the loaf, she said. So
yes, that's right.
That's another word I picked up.
That was in circulation when I was a kid as well, I think. Yeah.
Yes, brock. Well, now, when Mother would be making jam, and, anyone who makes jam, there's a sort of froth comes, and you keep skimming this off. Or if you're boiling a chicken, you skim all that off. Mum called that kesh. She said, oh, just get this kesh off, you see. So that was another one. And Reesty. If something had just gone off, you know, in the days before fridges and that, bacon or butter used to go risty, well, it meant it had gone over slightly, it had gone off. The zhauzhig.
Pardon?
A zhauzhig. That's a woman, a scolding woman, a woman with a sort of sharp tongue. Yes. Father McKillier. That's often used, you know.
What?
If you're all Father McKillier, you're all in a bit of a mess, you know.
I thought you meant a Catholic priest for a minute. Father McKillier?
Father McKillier, I don't know how you spell it. I suppose the Killier is the same as the name. But Father, I don't know. I've just done it phonetically, which I think would be a good idea for your news announcers, because, you know, they do put their foot in it with us Manxies, you know.
What's the worst thing they've done lately?
Say Dalby instead of Derby, and Ballarat one day. Oh dear, dear, dear.
Ballarat, that was desperate, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was desperate. So I feel, you know, and the likes of the farm, which is always when the Mills Baldwin thing, Cam Lork was coming over regularly. Well, it's Cam Lurk.
I told them it was Cumlurk, and Terry Kringle's always stuck to that.
Yes,
but then
Cumlurk.
there seem to be two pronunciations,
Yes.
and it's the same as Glenfaber and Glenfarber.
Yes,
You can't be sure you're right, can you?
But the farmer used to come in to me and he'd say, Cain Camlurk.
That's right.
To me, so that's as far as I was concerned, was the one to be used. Then, of course, as I say, if we're not careful, that it's Manx radio, and if you're going to let it keep going, then everything will get anglified, and then that you try your best to keep the Manx flavour going. So you've got full marks.
All right. The other one that will be fairly common, I suppose, is Govig, isn't it?
A Govig, yes. Well, you say it's the name of a fish. Well, I'm not very up on fish, but of course we were only talking to people who'd moved to Peel, and they said they were living in Peel, and we said, oh, you Peel Govigs now, and I said, well, you know, we've got a nickname too, the Douglas Butties. We're Douglas Butties.
Butties?
Butties, yes. Now, Kay Macon, who lived in Peel, her husband was a fish buyer, and I was walking past her house one day, and she shouted, hey, you Douglas Butty. I kept on walking, because I didn't know.
What does it mean, then?
I really don't know.
No idea how it originated, but that's what we were always known as, the Douglas Butties.
Over the years, the art of fine cooking rose to prominence as local personalities appeared. Kevin Woodford, for one. But locally, Carlo at the sea terminal came up with his own brand of entertainment.
You have, and you've had for several years, a good team behind you.
Yes, it's true.
You can stand in the front of the house, and you can stand as the entrepreneur of the Crow's Nest, but the backup must be important.
It is important, the backup of your kitchen. That's, I mean, anybody who says not, they're lying. You know, your kitchen is very, very important. But at the same time, I think that you at the front has got to have some kind of knowledge of the kitchen. Simply because you cannot argue. It's like you in your job. If you got somebody working under you, you cannot argue with that person about something is done wrong if you don't know yourself the job properly. So I think each one of us, you got to have some kind of knowledge on your background, no matter what you are in the kitchen or one where it is, because you find that if you got knowledge, you can have a good argue. You know, because there's some sauces which some people say is made in one way, some people make them another way. There is a basic of everything, because a cuisine is a cuisine, you basic of everything. But you have that. There's so many chefs that tend to vary their sauce in their own flipping ways that honestly sometimes you don't flipping know which is which.
But you buy for the restaurant, don't you?
I do all the buying, yes.
Fresh?
You know, fruit and vegetable, everything is fresh. I mean, I don't see the reason why buy frozen when you can get so much fresh food around the island. I mean, we've got beautiful fresh fish here. You know, you got plenty selection of fish here, shellfish, anything you want to find. You know, vegetables, meat.
In the next programme, Bishop's Court, farming, the closure of the Marine Biological Station, and mermaids. Manx Radio at 60, I'm John Moss. Join me then.